So we're happy to introduce David Rose, instructor at the MIT Media Lab and entrepreneur. And a little bit about David. His research focuses on making the physical environment an interface to digital information. He is the CEO at Ditto Labs, an image recognition software platform that scours social media photos to find brands and products.
Does that make you nervous?
It does.
We've all done that.
I love the introduction to his to the description. What if ordinary items could do extraordinary things, like cutlery and condiments that could monitor your eating habits, an umbrella that could tell you when it was going to rain, pill bottles that could talk and remind you when to take your medication, an orb that could glow when something exciting is happening in your stock portfolio, or a onesie that could keep your baby safe by monitoring the child's respiration, movement, and temperature. Sounds great, doesn't it? We also have David's book, Enchanted Objects. We do have it for purchase this evening, $17 if anyone's interested. I think David might even sign them at the end. What do you think, David?
In the first part of the book, I talk about 4 scenarios of 4 different futures that all position us differently in relationship to technology. And I call those the terminal world, prosthetics, animism, and enchanted objects. So just to explore sort of these 4 very different futures. The first one is the one that we're all used to. This is a Microsoft video that was produced a number of years ago that sort of anticipates the screening of the world, you know, when everything gets pixels painted onto it. And they're sort of right in this future video of, you know, what the world will feel like. We have more screens in planes and in kitchens and at workspaces and in schools and in airports, certainly. This is a nice multi-handed vision of a multi-handed device. But most of us are staring into these things like increasingly many hours of the day, and they're really monopolizing our attention, which I sort of feel is one of the fatal flaws in this world of black glass slabs, as I call them in the book. And you know, I think there's a built-in business model for more pixels everywhere, and it's called advertising. You know, this advertising has funded the proliferation of the internet into all parts of our lives, and we don't pay for Gmail and we don't pay for all of these services because there's usually ads in the sidebar or in the bottom. And I think we can sort of expect that in the future, but I think there are different ways that we have to interact with technology. And so what might those be? So another option might be if we can wear tech or even embed tech in some way in and on ourselves, which sounds scary, but this is the fantasy, I think, of, you know, the Iron Man fantasy. You know, you don't have to be born with the ability to fly like Superman. You could just put on this contraption and inherit these superpowers. One of my colleagues at the Media Lab, Hugh Hare, is a double amputee. He lost his legs in a climbing accident, and he's been experimenting with digital prosthetics that allow him to be taller, to climb better, to run faster and farther at a lower heart rate, which the Army is very interested in. You know, I think this is a godsend for people that have a deficit, like a cochlear implant is wonderful. But I think for, you know, another colleague at MIT, Thad Starner, you know, he's sort of a social pariah, right? Like, he's been wearing tech like on his face. He's now the leader of the Google Glass project, and he's been, you know, it's very hard to interact with that. You know, you walk up to him and he has this chording keyboard, you know, where you almost like a accordion. You know, he's typing in his pocket somewhere, and you're like, Thad, what's going on? Like, are we talking, or is something else? You know, are you looking up something else online? And you know, and I think it's interesting that we've, as a tech culture, have rejected Google Glass. And you know, it's not often that you have a new technology that emerges and people say, no, like, we don't want people wearing that, people using that. And so Google has killed so far the Glass project. And I think one of the reasons is it's socially isolating to have somebody looking at something else and seeing something else as you try to interact with them. So I think that's one of the fatal flaws of these digital prosthetics as the general way that we'll interact with technology. Another future might be if we outsource the tech. Maybe we don't need it in and on us if we can outsource it to other entities. This is the vision that we've had for a long time of either from Metropolis or C-3PO or even Honda that's pursuing Asimo, these sort of humanoid type robots. And the robotics community, I think, has really discovered that these things could have personality, and we would sort of solve the human-computer interface challenge if they were just like us. We talk to them, they listen to us, they understand our emotive state. That sort of solves the human-computer interaction. So I sort of think of this as like the Downton fantasy. You've got your people. You don't need, they take care of you. You've got like one of them that figures out what you should wear, and others that cook for you, and other ones that drive you around, and other ones that teach you things, and and they all have a place in your life and a personality, and you interact with them as you do, a human. Well, they are humans, but and the robotics community, I think, really knows that if you give these things childlike proportions, then we will bond to them faster. Like we will love, like we will. They'll be like kittens or Japanese anime, or these things are much more attractive than iPads. There's a friend of mine, also from out of the Media Lab, who makes this dieting robot called Autumn, and it's designed to sit next to your fridge and make you feel terrible. But it's different than just an iPad on your fridge where you might log what you eat, because it's sitting there with these big, huge eyes, and it's like, so it's really, attractive and making you feel something for it. I want you to look at another humanoid, sort of a robot that has some human-like characteristics called GEVO. Has anybody heard of GEVO? This is another startup out of the Media Lab that has raised over $2 million on Kickstarter, which is a place that you can put up an idea and other people can order whatever, they can order your product or your film or your idea. So this is a film about GEVO.
The world's first family robot. Say hi, GEVO.
Hi, GEVO.
GEVO helps everyone out throughout their day. He's the world's best cameraman. By intelligently tracking the action around him, he can independently take video and photos, so that you can put down your camera and be a part of the scene.
GEVO, take the picture.
He's a hands-free helper. You can talk to him, and he'll talk to you back, so you don't have to skip a beat.
Excuse me, Anne?
Yes, GEVO.
Melissa just sent a reminder that she's picking you up in half an hour to go grocery shopping.
Thanks, GEVO.
He's an entertainer and educator. Through interactive applications, GEVO can teach.
Let me in, or else I'll... And I'll blow your house in.
Hey, where'd you go? There you are.
He's the closest thing to a real-life teleportation device. He can turn and look at whoever you want with a simple tap of your finger.
Check out my turkey dinner, Mom.
I wish you wouldn't eat that.
Hey, they made turkey pizza. I want turkey pizza.
And he's a platform, so his skills keep expanding. He'll be able to connect to your home.
Welcome home, Eric.
Hey, buddy. Can you order some takeout for me?
Sure thing. Chinese, as usual?
You know me so well.
And even be a great wingman.
You have a voice message from Ashley. Want to hear it?
Absolutely.
I'm gonna stop it right there. So. But notice what GEVO is trying to be for Eric and for this family. It's like another member of the family, right? Like, so he has the same promise as a member of Downton. Like he's trying to do all of these things for you. He's trying to have a personality and make a joke and that sort of thing. And I feel like the fatal flaw of the robotics community, which I think most of you might recognize, is this thing called the Uncanny Valley, which is the closer these robots come to look like humans, the more that they threaten our own humanity and the more that they fail us. Rodney Brooks, who ran the robotics group at MIT, said, "The way a robot looks makes a promise." Like, you don't expect a lot from your Roomba, like the thing that cleans, because it doesn't look very smart. But as soon as it starts to look human-like, then you have an expectation of what it does. So this guy, Masahiro Mori, described this notion of an uncanny valley, which is if you plot like how much we react to human likeness as things get more human-like. Our emotional response goes up and up. We're like, oh, it's cute. I love it. It's like a little toy. It looks like a little dog or a seal or something that we sort of recognize. But then it falls off a cliff if it gets too close to looking like a human, and then it's like a zombie to us or something that really threatens us. So I think that's sort of the fatal flaw of the robotics as a way that we might interact with technology. So the fourth way, or the fourth future, if it's not black glass slabs and app stores, and it's not wearable tech, and it's not outsourcing it to things that look like humans or human likeness, maybe we should embed technology as what I call a little AI, rather than a big artificial intelligence. It's like just a little sprinkling of artificial intelligence in lots and lots of things. So what I mean by this is, on the hardcover of the book, there's this umbrella that I developed at a company called Ambient Devices that I started about 14 years ago. And the umbrella was inspired by Frodo's sword. Does anybody remember Frodo's sword from Middle-earth? Remember what sort of special feature it had? Remember? So it was called Sting. And in addition to being sort of the right size for a hobbit, it also glowed when orcs were nearby. So he could know, like, it sort of anticipated its own use. So I thought, oh, why don't I make an umbrella that knows that rain is nearby, and it just has this sprinkling pattern that sort of anticipates. So that data comes from AccuWeather and is sent to the hilt of the umbrella, not the sword, and it's included in a video later. So I really had a fun time in the book, sort of exploring these stories from our childhood or from science fiction or from Greek myth that have these enchanted objects, these sort of ordinary things that have a little extraordinariness to them, like the carpet that flies, or the cloak that shields you, that makes you invisible, or the crystal ball, or the pool that you look into for clairvoyance or to see the future. Or, I mean, as you think back to your own childhood, you can probably think of these stories that had some winged horse or some sort of extraordinary thing. And I think those are interesting to think about because they reveal things about us. They reveal what we want. They reveal our desires. And those things, I think, are pretty persistent and don't change very often. So you all remember the glass that reveals who's the fairest of them all. There's a company that I'm helping out in New York called Memory Mirror, or MemoMe is the name of the company. The product is Memory Mirror. So it reveals the fairest outfit of them all. So as you stand in front of it, it recognizes who you are, and as you gesture to it, you can spin around and see your ass, and and then also see recent outfits that you've tried on. And Neiman Marcus believes, I guess, that you'll be more likely to buy something if you can compare. Or these trash cans. Have people seen these around Brookline?
Yeah.
Do you know what they do? Well, in addition to being just nice big trash cans, they have a solar cell at the top, which powers a compressor, so it crunches the trash down, so the truck doesn't have to come as often. But it also has a cellular connection. It has basically like the guts of a cell phone inside, which talks to the nearest AT&T or Verizon tower and calls the truck when it's full.
Oh, good.
So you only have to drive the expensive union guys and the stinky trucks around to the full cans, which is pretty nice, right? As sort of an enchanted trash can. It's a trash can that can talk, that has this sort of augmentation to it. Or this pen. I brought one of these pens. This is a pen by a company called Anoto, or it's also called the Live Scribe. It's a little bit bigger than an ordinary pen, but it writes on any sort of paper. But embedded in the pen is a little camera. And so if you write on a paper, a certain type of paper that they sell, sort of a razors and blades business, that has a dot pattern, a really subtle dot pattern embedded in the paper, it stores all your gestures. So it digitizes everything you write. It also has a little microphone embedded and a speaker, so it will record the conversation or the lecture And so when you want to get back to that spot in the lecture, you just tap your notes right there, and it will play that part back. But it's a pen too, right? So it's like, so it's not an app and it's not a new thing. It's sort of like an old thing that has just this additional layer of functionality. So I like these sort of old things that have a little bit of newness. I want to show you. I live in Coolidge Corner, and we live in an apartment on St. Paul Street. And the New York Times came by to do a piece both at the Media Lab where I teach and also at my house. So you get to see my 6-year-old kid who's at Lawrence, School, and hopefully someday here. But I try to invent things at the Media Lab, bring them home, and see how my wife reacts and my kids. So you can see some of these things. Enchanted objects are ordinary things that have the same functionality that they had before, except now they can talk. They're connected. These are ordinary things that have extraordinary capabilities.
When we're creating technology for the home, really we want to make something that's seamless and transparent, and that as opposed to having things sort of call out and draw your attention to it, make it a more ambient experience.
We'll just continue to behave with those everyday objects as we do in the world, and we can remain focused on connectivity between two people.
What we're seeing now is this proliferation of different devices that are, moving out from the cell phone and onto our bodies and into the world.
So in the middle of our living room is a coffee table that has Google Earth embedded in the coffee table. And I just found that having access to this amazing zoomable map completely changes how often we talk about travel and how often we talk about the world and how often we look up places that are mentioned. And it's nice to have this beautiful large reference object sitting in the middle of our living space. Our devices can be a lot simpler, and the interaction to them can be a lot simpler. The internet-connected umbrella can just be an umbrella that only shows whether it's going to rain. You don't need to tap on an icon or do anything that seems sort of artificial.
We come from a time in which we need to adapt to our homes and not the other way around. So what if our home could be a platform that we personalize and we customize? The key is, how do we create this ecosystem, these technologies that allow us to move from one experience to the other in the most seamless, most magical way.
Some people might think that a connected home is overwhelming, that there'll be so much information in the connected home that it's just a cacophonous environment and you wouldn't want to live there. But I think about how we decorate our homes today. We put photographs everywhere, we put paintings up, we put post-it notes up. There's a lot of decoration and adornment in the home. And I think if enchanted objects can be designed in the right way, we're going to want hundreds of them around us.
I think what we're going to see is a new renaissance where designers as well as computer scientists are going to really make a really big impact in the type of technology that we see in the home.
The history of computers has mostly been about efficiency. I think one of the things that's changing is that enchanted objects can be about adding motion and add magic to the fabric of our everyday lives and experiences. How many people want a Google Earth coffee table? Isn't that neat? I think it's really neat. It's really fun. It's being controlled by a gestural controller made by a company called Leap Motion that knows exactly sort of the position of your hand. So you can zoom out, zoom in, fly left, fly right, that sort of thing. Okay, so the posters in front of you are sort of my synthesis of what are the aspirations that we discover in fairy tales or in Greek myths or in science fiction, and how does that help us organize this emerging Internet of Things, divided into 6 categories and sort of shaped like a periodic table. So the first one is the aspiration to be all-knowing, which I think computers have tried to help us do for a long time. When I started this company called Ambient Devices, we thought about how to create a super simple object that would show dynamic information. How could we make a 1-pixel browser? Just one color and show whatever you wanted with the color. So we did this frosted glass ball that had these LEDs inside and a little wireless chip, and it could show what the weather is going to be tomorrow. It would pulse if it's going to rain, or how the stock market is doing, like down or up, or pulsing if it's over some threshold, or if you have a kid who's asthmatic, what's the pollen count today? It's up very high today. Is it too windy or not windy enough to sail or fly a kite? Are the fish biting based on the change in barometric pressure? Does your garden need watering? Sort of anything that you'd want to attend to and glance at. And what we found was people became really obsessed almost with the information, especially if they could do something about it. Like the first time we had the orb, I put it in the hall in our house in Cambridge. We lived in Cambridge at the time, and my wife, we just had a first child, and my wife, I would come home and she would say, the market was way down today, the orb was very red, so I called Schwab and we traded a bunch of stocks. Like, no, you're supposed to ignore the market for the most part. So I just realized, wow, this is really persuasive, this object that allows you to tune into things. So then we focused more on things like showing people's blood sugar levels if you're diabetic, so you have more of a sense of your blood sugar, or showing how many steps you've walked if so your kids will give you a hard time at the end of the day and you can take a walk after dinner. Or the company now does this product, which is called the Energy Jewel, and it glows a color that represents how much energy you're using in your house. Sort of an invisible thing now, trying to make that thing visible. So red is sort of using more than you typically do, and goes to green when it's less. And it's being given away by energy companies for something called demand management. So energy companies are trying to make you more aware of how much energy you're using, and then when it's expensive, like during the peak times of the day, they want you to, as Arnold Schwarzenegger said, smart, shift, and save. So he would try to get people, especially in California where you have rolling brownouts, to sort of run their laundry later in the day or run their dishwashers during non-peak time, so you'd sort of smooth out the consumption curve. So this is has been a success as sort of a persuasive device. And that's sort of my lesson from the invention of the orb and this sort of thing, is that if you want people to change, don't bury the information in an app, where they're not likely to see it, but instead try to make it unavoidable, sort of like this energy information. We also worked with the CEO of this bank in North Carolina called the Trulient Bank, and this executive said he really believed in behavioral feedback loops, and he said, the most important thing for the health of the bank is how customers feel. So he said, I want customer satisfaction, the index of customer satisfaction, sort of as large and as tall as possible outside the bank. So he took the call center data from how people were reacting to the bank's services, and he mapped it to color, and he put it in this big monolith outside the bank, and he told all of his employees about what it showed. So it can sort of work at a personal level, and as a group level, and also at a company level. I want to talk a little bit about the second aspiration on your poster, which is the aspiration to connect with other people. I haven't yet gotten one yet, but I'm excited about wearing things, wearing this data on things like Dick Tracy's FaceTime wristwatch. This is a shot of the new Apple Watch, and I'm excited about all of these app designers have to decide what they're going to put on the watch, right? There are like 1 million app designers, and they all have to answer this question of what's the important 1 inch by 1 inch piece of my app that people really would want to wear on the wrist. If it's a running company, if it's a Nike type tracker, maybe that's an obvious question, but for a lot of apps, I think it's not obvious. But the one that's most interesting is the back of the watch is able to shine a light into your arm and then read your heartbeat. So you can send this biosignal to a loved one, which is sort of romantic, I suppose. But you can also do things like what are called heart rate variability, which is an indicator of stress. So when you're stressed, your heart rate doesn't necessarily go fast and it doesn't necessarily go slowly, but it's irregular. So that's an indicator that you're stressed, which I think is that's an interesting signal, and I think some people will make good apps that will get people to be more attuned to that type of information. I just wanted to talk about the doorbell that we have in our house. You saw it in the video, but do you remember in the Harry Potter series, the Weasleys had a big family? Do you remember their big family? And they had this clock in the kitchen, and each hand of the clock was a family member, and it plotted, similar to a location-based service where you plot people on a map. This was actually better because it just plotted their state. So are they in the garden, or in school, or in prison, or at Quidditch, or in mortal peril? For the 4th and 5th book, they're all in mortal peril all the time. So in our kitchen, we have a doorbell that has a ringtone for every member of the family. So sort of like Prokofiev, where you have a ringtone for every member of the story. In our family, this is the doorbell, and it just plays a sound when people are homebound, when each member of the family is homebound. So it gets your location, and then just, Raina has a sound, and Adam has a sound, and Sharon has a sound, which is convenient for lots of reasons. Sort of know they're coming home.
What's transmitting the?
What's that?
What's transmitting the information?
Good question. It's actually using something called Google Latitude, which is an app. So it uses the phone's location as an indication of where people are. So a couple of the next aspiration that I have in the poster is safekeeping. So rather than domination, I decided to do safekeeping. But I don't know about you, I kill a lot of plants, and this is a very simple device for safekeeping of plants. So it is a moisture, pH sensor, and light sensor that you tell the app what plant it is, and then the plant screams, tweets at you and says, "Help! I need water! Help! I'm drowning!" So it's called Flower Power, and I think it's like sold at phone stores now. So it's sort of crazy. It's it's called what's called Bluetooth, which is a local wireless standard that talks to your phone. So it gets data back and forth to your phone, and so that's one type of safekeeping. How much? I think it's about $100. 70, something like that. There are lots of tracking mechanisms that are emerging for either dogs or children or your parents. To sort of know where things are, which is one of the uses of the Internet of Things. I wanted to show you one of the projects from the Media Lab, which are these wallets that we did for Bank of America. Bank of America is one of the sponsors, and the problem that Bank of America articulated was when people use their plastic, they use their Bank of America card, they have no sense of how they're doing against a monthly budget. And there's no feedback on the card. So we thought, well, let's take this super common object of a man's wallet and try to embed the feedback of whether you're blowing through your budget into the wallet. So this has a variable resistance hinge. So as you blow through your budget, it becomes harder to open the wallet, which is good. I really like this because it's the most ordinary of objects, and the information is not embedded in pixels or sound, but it's embedded in sort of what's called a haptic feedback, a touch-based feedback. This was a prototype where this one actually gets bigger when you get your paycheck. So when you get a deposit, it has a little bladder that puffs up in the wallet, so you feel it like you would feel a money roll. So these things can be fun too. So the next category is things that help us live a more, maybe a longer and healthier life. And for this, the inspiration for this came from sort of a genie in the bottle idea. This is one of the prototypes of the Media Lab that I really love. This is a jazz trio that's embedded in 3 bottles. That was the bass in that one. There's the drums in that one. So it's sort of nice, right? It's an everyday object where this everyday gesture of just uncorking a bottle sort of lets out the information, sort of genie thing. So taking that into a pedestrian realm, I my last company was this company called Vitality that did this product called the Glow Cap, and we noticed that 50% of the U.S. is prescribed something, and we take it about half of the time. The seriousness of this is that it accounts for about $300 billion, 300 billion, is that right? Yeah, that is right, in unnecessary hospitalizations due to non-adherence, what's called non-adherence. So people don't take their meds and they have to go to the hospital because of that reason. So it's a huge load on our insurance companies, and it's also a huge opportunity lost for pharma companies who make money from selling pills, of course. And also, if you need the meds, it's probably not good that you're forgetting to take them as well. So there's that. So we took this ordinary, the ordinary base of a amber pill vial, since that's the way all these medications are distributed in the US through CVS and Walgreens and Express Scripts. And we just made the cap smart. So it's still child-proof, it's still light and tight, it passes all those regulations. But it just connects to the nearest cell phone tower, and then knows when it's off the top of the vial. So when we look at normal, we worked with this wonderful group at Mass General Hospital called Center for Connected Health, and we did a study for hypertension for people that have high blood pressure. And we just looked at what normal looks like. So we just gave these out to people, to one group of people, and said, don't do anything differently. And this is what the data looked like. So these are days, these are people, and pink means they didn't open the cap that day, which means they probably didn't take the med, right? And gray means we had no information because they didn't sign on to the study yet. So that's what normal looks like. And then we turned on the services, and this is what the data looks like, so the other group. So a huge change in behavior. And so the cap does 4 things. It subtly reminds you through pulsing lights for 2 hours, and then it makes little arpeggios that try to sort of get your attention with the lightest touch possible, sort of trying to be polite about it. And then they can call your home phone or send you text message. So that's sort of the first thing. The second thing it does is it connects you to a non-professional caregiver by sending an email every week that says, your dad on these days took meds and on these days didn't take his meds. So he would get your data and you would get his data too, because that's only fair. And then the third thing is it sends data to your doctor if you want to. And the fourth thing is it sends data to the pharmacy, so they automate refills if you want to. And so we found this huge change in behavior based on this sort of super simple, $3 in China sort of device. And AT&T loves it too, because
a network of possibilities.
It's another reason to use cellular connectivity.
In here, video games are not confined to screens.
So we had to pay AT&T $1 a month for the data to go back and forth.
In here, medicine talks to you.
This is a dog tracking
In
application.
here, pets never get lost. It's the AT&T network, and what's possible in here is almost impossible to say.
How many people watch the Colbert Report or have seen that? So we were parodied on the Colbert Report too.
Remembering to take your pills can be difficult. I have a little mnemonic device I use to remind myself. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday are the days I take my pills. Or it might be nights, I don't remember. Well, the Vitality Corporation has a solution called glow caps. Jim?
Glow caps are internet-connected pill caps that go on regular pill bottles. Now, each day when it's time for Grandpa to take his heart pills, the glow cap pulses with this light. If he doesn't see this light for some reason, the glow cap plays a ringtone, kind of like a cell phone. Now, here's where it really gets cool. If Grandpa misses a pill, the glow cap will call his home phone as a reminder.
This is perfect, because while old people can be forgetful, they are great when it comes to setting up the internet, recognizing cell phone ringtones, and accessing voicemail messages.
I don't mind being parodied. How many people have worn one of these activity trackers? Like either the, yeah, good. Which one do you have? Fitbit. This is the Fitbit if people want to see it. Has anybody tried when it was out, the Nike Fuel Band? This is another sort of ugly bracelet. So this is a woman who works for this company called Misfit. And this product is called the Shine, which you can either wear around your neck or around your wrist. I think it's probably at that time, this was probably the my favorite of all the ones she's trying here. Since then, like Garmin has one, Microsoft has one. You know, they've really proliferated. There's so many people that are doing tracking, and for the most part, they're all ugly. Until this year, where there's a company called Withings. They also make this blood pressure cuff, and they also make a scale. I was on Jon Stewart, and I talked about how my Withings scale tweeted my weight every Saturday because I set it up to do that, which is stupid. And at about the same time, I was going to this awesome bakery in Brookline, and it was Foursquare had just come out, and so I checked in every Saturday at the bakery about the same time as my scale tweeted my weight, and it wasn't going down. so a lot of you can have too much information leaked out to your social network too about your. Anyway, Withings has this new watch called the Activité. They're a French company. But I really like it because it just looks like a nice watch, right? It doesn't look like a ugly wearable, technology thing. It just looks like a pretty, made in Switzerland somewhere watch. And it tracks time, but it also has the secondary dial that tracks number of steps against some goal. So it's the percent of the goal that you've achieved, whether your goal is 3,000 steps or 10,000 steps or whatever your goal is. But I mostly like that it seems like it's a fashion first item, not a geek first item. And this is starting to happen with other companies too. Tory Burch has a deal with Fitbit now, so she is designing these enclosures for the Fitbit. There's a company in New York called Ringly that's doing these sort of internet connected jewelry. It's sort of going into the world of Gucci, Prada, blah blah blah, rather than geeky tech company. And I think this is a good step. The Shine that I talked about, they just have a relationship with, how do you pronounce that? Thank you. I can never do that. And so it's embedded in crystal, and I think actually with this version, the crystal captures the light and recharges the device as well, which is nice because you don't want to have to recharge these things. Like the Apple Watch, you have to charge it every day. There's another company that has this wearable that I think is very interesting called the June bracelets, and it measures your light exposures to see if you have enough lotions and potions on. So it's probably they're probably going to get distributed free by Estee Lauder or somebody who sells expensive lotions and potions. So it's interesting to think how, when we started, we said, well, pixels are the indigenous business model for advertising, or the web has advertising to support it. Maybe wearables have healthcare to support it. Like maybe healthcare is the indigenous business model for all of these wearables. I do want to show you one of the most common object, maybe is a silverware. One of my students did noticed that when people eat quickly, they eat too much, right? Because you don't feel full, right? So he thought, well, what if we could instrument up a fork? So the fork has a little a battery, an accelerometer, so an accelerometer knows how something is moved around, and a little motor, so that when you eat too quickly, it introduces a little bit of palsy into the fork. So it's it's a really stupid idea, but but I like how it's taking the most ordinary of things and trying to think about how to imbue it with.
It's apparently even worse than that. There was an article in the Times last week from somebody who
Oh, really?
recommended it.
Huh.
I looked it up and looked at the Amazon reviews, and basically every review said the problem with this is that rather than just vibrating in your hand as you're going to take another bite too soon, it vibrates when it gets in your mouth.
Oh, really? Like vials. That's funny. Yeah, you can order the similar product called the Happy Fork for HAPI for haptic feedback. Sort of play on words. Is my watch around? Yeah, I'm gonna get that back. Okay, and the one that I haven't tried yet that I'm intrigued by is a respiration sensor for people that are into yoga or into breathing as a way of relaxation. This measures what your breathing patterns are and gives you feedback on that. So I'm intrigued to try this one. Any questions before I go on to? Yeah.
I've heard a lot of comments about these sorts of devices, and I heard a comment that said that a lot of these companies are selling these things spend a lot of time winning customers because they lose a lot of customers on the backside.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people saying, "Wow, this is really nifty," after a week or two, you throw it in the
Right.
drawer, and it sits there with all the other stuff that you don't really use.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you sort of attribute the reasons for? Any sense of that?
Well, I think one is a lot of them require a lot of care and feeding. You know, and like, who wants to recharge more things? You know, it's a pain in the ass enough to recharge your cell phone at the end of every day. Like, how many things do you want to plug in at the end of the, and especially if you don't know if they're about to run out of battery because they don't have good feedback. And so if this one's once a day and this one's once a week and this one's every 3 days, like, how do you keep track of? So I think that will be solved over time by things like parasitic power harvesting. Like, as you move it generates more power for itself, or batteries are getting better, chips are getting are able to be sort of turned off and have slow wake cycles. That will help that. I think putting a little bit of solar power on a lot of things makes sense. You know, sort of like, this is a recording device, but why doesn't it have a little patch of solar? So if it were sunny out, you wouldn't have to buy new batteries so frequently. So I think that's one reason. I think another reason could be it just doesn't offer enough value. I think another reason might be, like, maybe that's all you need. Like I had a sleep sensor, which I used for about a month, and I learned a lot about how I sleep and how alcohol affects my sleep and how going to bed late and watching TV, like watching a movie starting at 11 p.m., which is something I used to do when I was younger. You know, it's sort of like, I'm done with the day, let's go to the movie store and rent a movie and stay up late and watch a movie, sort of as a way of relaxing, like, absolutely disturbed my sleep. And so I learned a lot in that 30 days, and then I didn't use it after that, and maybe that's fine. Maybe it's like a course of therapy or something. You know, you learn what you need to learn. And I mean, another reason is I think we continue to wear things like jewelry because it's not just for the function of the jewelry. It's because we want to say something about our relationship or about our style, and those are things we choose to wear day after day because they express something about us.
So you think there's maybe just some sort of basic failure, or they're not hitting on all cylinders with all of the, you have a whole bunch of different needs you're sort of providing with this structure.
Yeah.
You don't think they're really hitting on all those things as strongly as they should be?
I think as a community we're learning a lot just about the design of these things, like how easy they should be, how much complexity should they offer, how much data should they offer, to whom, how often, in what format. Like, it's all the wild, wild west right now. It's sort of like early days of laser printers where we were like, typography, woohoo, like, let's go crazy and use 8 fonts in 1 letter. And, you know, then over time we sort of all learn about typography and we, you know, sort of grow up a little bit. I certainly think that's happening. And it's happening with apps too. Like, look at the average, like for an app, like there's a local company that has an app called Lose It, where you log things you eat. Like, they have probably 90% drop off after 2 weeks or less of people that download the app and they're like, oh, this is cool, I'm gonna try this. And then they are like, they just sort of, it's not that interesting. I mean, I do that with apps. Like, I voraciously download new apps. I'm like, oh, this sounds really neat, I'm gonna try it. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, nope, that didn't work for me. So
are you saying that only new things, new ideas are motivating you, rather than improving some old?
No, I think that improving the interesting thing about the poster to me is that these aspirations are durable. Like, there's durability in the knowing more and the connecting with others and the feeling safe and secure and the long life and the getting places seamlessly. Like, all of those things we've wanted those things forever. And now this next wave of technology, which is arguably just as big as the internet, maybe bigger, will hope to fulfill some of those same wishes and desires. And there will be lots of failures along the way, especially in the early years. And it's early years now, but it is sort of the biggest. You know, if you look at the tech community, like the Internet of Things is that's the biggest idea this year. You know, of what people are excited about. It's machine learning, computer vision, Internet of Things, cloud computing. Those are the big ones. So that's what a lot of money's pouring into that, a lot of experimentation, a lot of entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Well, hacking gets to be such a big thing these days.
Hacking?
Hacking.
So
how
do you mean breaking into systems?
Like it seems like every other day there's some big headline that.
Yeah, I think it's mostly driven by headlines, though. Like the banks haven't lost your data recently.
Who knows who has my data these days?
I know, but I mean, I think the thing that sells newspapers and sort of incites a lot of anxiety and makes us watch the news and other things is data privacy and security. And I actually think like the security protocols are pretty good, and the banks have been using them for a long time, and insurance companies and retailers, and most of the hacks and the mistakes are sort of humans driving off the road. Sort of humans using weak passwords and not doing these things well. So I'm not that worried about your bank account information and anybody in this room like figuring out and stealing your money. Like, these are pretty secure systems if done well. That's my take. But I'm not trying to sell newspapers, so yeah.
I think the simplification of this is wonderful.
Thank you.
In terms of learning how to use it and so on. Now, speaking from the older generation, how do we find out about this?
It's a good question. I mean, you go to lectures like like this.
This is a real eye-opener.
Good. That's my goal. I think there are lots of mechanisms for continuous learning about this stuff. Some of my favorites are there are two websites that are crowdsourcing websites. One is called Indiegogo, like indie film, but Indiegogo, and the other one's called Kickstarter. And those are both websites where if you have a product idea or a film idea or a whatever idea, you can make a compelling case for the idea. You say, these are the people involved, and here's what it's going to look like, and here's why I'm doing it, and all, everything's done except for going into manufacturing, and with your help, So you pledge sometimes like $1 or $5 if you just think, oh, that's sort of cool, or if you say, I'd really like to get the internet connected. Let's see, which thing is being kickstarted right now? There's the umbrella. No, was it Kickstarter? Oh, right, the August lock, or the what was the other one called? Lockatron. Yeah. So there's an internet connected door lock, so called Lockatron, and so you could go and you could say, okay, sounds like a good idea. Like if they can have my credit card and they can ding my credit card, and if you ship me one, they can take $100 or whatever what they're selling it for. And so if they can get enough people to do that, so it's this wonderful place for lots of experimentation, lots of failures along the way, but you get to see lots of neat ideas. I brought another magazine that I really like called Make Magazine. It's by O'Reilly, and it's sort of for the hobbyist but tinkerer that has like a bunch of projects. And to me, like, I don't do a lot of the projects, but it's fun to sort of see like who's tinkering around with what kind of, this is one about wearables, of embedding technology in clothing. So
I thought you were going to say something like, there's a consulting service that I'm starting.
Oh.
By different age groups, so you can see this. Thank you.
Let me talk about the last two categories, and then I'm happy to talk more about questions and such. So we all want to make getting around easier. There's a company that's a local Boston company, also spun out of MIT, called Super Pedestrian, that raised money from a Boston VC, Boston venture capital firm called Spark Capital. And they're making a bike, actually a bike hub, that embeds electric drive, batteries, and wireless control, and an air sensor, like for pollution sensor. I'm not sure why exactly we need that in the bike, but all in the hub of a bike. And what I like about this is apparently one of the reasons people don't commute by bike, besides the safety issue, is they're worried about being sweaty. So if you can erase the hills on their commute by giving them extra power over the top, then they won't worry about that as much. And I also like that the hub, rather than selling people a whole new bike, it's a little bit like, because it's retrofitting sort of your existing infrastructure, your existing bikes, with a little bit of smarts. Sometimes I have a picture of this, but did you notice in Brookline that they lobotomized all the parking meters? Like they just shaved the top off and put on the stock is the same, the cast iron base is the same that used to hold your change, but now there's a little patch of solar and a little credit card reader that, and I think that's brilliant, right? Because they didn't have to tear out all of the old meters and put in new meters. They just shaved, they just took the top of the meter off and made the top now internet connected, because it has to verify your credit card. So there's a little cellular connection, I think it's cellular, I don't know exactly, in all of those meters. Yeah?
How is that powered?
There's an electric motor, like a power drill or a mixer, that's embedded in the hub, and batteries that are embedded in the hub. And I think it's regenerative braking as well. So if you put the brakes on, I think. So I think that's neat, because it will, that's not really teleportation, but it certainly helps us get there. And I'm a big fan of Tesla, not for its greenness, but also for the idea of like sort of starting with a fashion brand, starting with an object of desire rather than a Nissan Leaf or something. But one of the things that I'm most impressed with by Tesla is not only that it's all electric and the maps are big and such, but they embedded internet connectivity in every car. So every car is a hotspot, it has Wi-Fi, and a cellular connection to the tower. And that means that you can do what's called OTA, or over-the-air updates. So it means your old hardware can get new software. So your maps are always up to date, and your music is always up to date, and the software of your car is, every 2 weeks, the Tesla gets like an update. And last week it was when you cross a lane line, vibrate the steering wheel. And now it, automatically in cruise control, it follows the car in front of you like 7 cars back or 4 cars back or whatever you decide. And all of those are just pushed to all the existing cars. So in some ways, there's sort of a sustainability value proposition here, which is maybe we won't have to replace our hardware as often if the software if the functionality can be upgraded. Right? We won't need to get new stuff as rapidly if the brains can get updated remotely. So I think that's interesting from another angle. So last category, ready? Yes.
About the jogging shoe, is Nike working on that shoe so that people won't fall? I remember reading something about that.
That's a great question. There are many people that are working on gait detection, so that that tries to anticipate whether you're wobbly and whether you might be at risk of falling. But Nike is not one of them, as far as I know. The Nike shoe was targeted at runners to tell you how fast you're going. And it did that by sensing what the dwell time was. So if you slow down a runner, if you know what the runner's weight is and stride, the dwell time is indicative of how fast you're running. So if your dwell time is smaller, you're running faster. And so it would tell you how fast and how long you've run. But good question. So this is another project from the Media Lab from Hiroshi Ishii's group called the Tangible Media Group. And this is called the I/O brush, for input-output brush. So like the pen, it has a little camera at the tip of the brush, so you can just sample the world and then brush with that pattern. Is that fun? So I'm optimistic that for personal expression, for things like making music or painting or sports or play, that this type of technology will make it more fun, will give us more scaffolding, more, as Seymour Papert said, bricolage, more like Lego, like sort of make it easier to build stuff. Whether it's the I/O brush, or there's a tennis racket. I'm a tennis player. I love the clay courts down on Amory Park. And this tennis racket embeds an accelerometer, so it understands how the tennis racket is swung. And it knows if it's a forehand or if it's a backhand. And it gives you visualizations of where you're hitting the ball and how hard and how often with forehands and backhands and other sort of information about your play, which hopefully encourages more people to play. Now there are golf clubs that have similar tech built into them. I was able to work on Guitar Hero, which was this video game that I write about in the book that tried to make music making something that could be faster to learn and fun. Right? It sort of inverted the learning curve. Like with Guitar Hero, it starts off as almost like a tapping game. You just have to tap in rhythm, but you feel like musicianship. You feel like you're in front of people and you're having a ball. And then over time, it gets harder and harder. I wish somebody would do Cello Hero for my daughter, because cello is hard, right? Like there are no frets. You're almost always off. It's hard. Let's see, I want to show you just a couple more things. So what I'm working on now is an image recognition system, which means this sort of this field, part of computer vision, or sort of part of software engineering is a field called computer vision. And computer vision is trying to have, is trying to create algorithms that allow computers to see. And when they see, it's like on the Tesla car, it sees the lane lines, right? Or we look for bad guys in airports. We don't do that, but computer vision people do. Or they look, drones look for sheep versus people in turbans or whatever. And computer vision has been used for security, for the security field for a long time. But what my company, Ditto Labs, which I started 2 years ago, is doing is looking at the photos that people share, either on social media. Guess how many photos were shared yesterday on social media? 1.6 billion. Just yesterday. That's not taken, that's shared. Like on Instagram, on Tumblr, on Facebook. People are just sharing all of this stuff about their lives. And that's before they're wearing these. And these are called life logging cameras. These little cameras that you can stick wherever, like on your clothing, or you put one on the wall, like Dropcam is a part of this company that Google acquired, or you put them in, on the streets. And all of these cameras, this camera takes a photo every 30 seconds, just so you know.
Is that what you have on now?
Yes. Yeah. So what you see is like here. Let's see.
So we're going to all be on the web tonight, right? Somewhere.
Not the web. I'm not going to share it with anybody, but I will show you this, which is, oh, that's interesting. It's not working. So this is a day. This is a flip book that I made with this camera when I was teaching a class in Copenhagen with a magician. That's the magician. And what do you notice about the photos that it captures? It's sort of like what the Nike Fuel Band is telling you, except it's not steps, but it's, how often am I in front of a screen versus working with other people, or at a whiteboard, or outside, or inside, or snacking, or, it sort of gives you this visual snapshot of your day. But it's almost useless without computer vision. Because we're not going to all look at this every day, right? It's just too much information. So what I built this company called Ditto, which is now about 16 people, most of them are computer vision experts, is to basically find the photos that people are posting on Instagram and then say, what is that? Like, what are people doing? Like, that's a Vera Bradley bag, so we can recognize which Vera Bradley pattern it is, or where they're eating, or what their passions are, like who's posting Harley Davidson photos. And to date, what we're doing with that is selling the data to these guys. Because market research forever has been wondering, like, how are people using products? How often? when, with what other products? Like when people eat Kraft mac and cheese, is that for dinner with wine? Is it, for a snack at school? Like when are they doing this sort of brand, it's almost ethnographic research in a way. And so we're looking at, is there a face in the photo? Is someone smiling? We can find like who has a Coke and a smile, like who's wearing Prada, who's outside, and so all of these things are automatically determined. So these are 3 pictures recently from Twitter, and the text is, we all need this for the weekend, or happy Danny and Hallie, or don't worry and be jealous, it's a natural reaction. So no one's describing what's in the photo. No one's saying, me and my friends at the beach drinking Corona. But the photos reveal all of that, so we find all of that signal in the noise of all these photos. So you can try it if you want. If you go to streamditto.com, there's a live stream. If you just want, and you can choose a category like alcohol or fashion brands or cars or whatever, and you'll see what people are sharing publicly. This is all public data through Instagram and Tumblr and Twitter. We don't look at Facebook data because we can't, because it's private. And you can see what the brands are now able to see with all this data. Any questions about that before I go on to, I have 2 more ideas to share. Anybody worried about the brand recognition thing? It does seem a little bit creepy to me. Like it does, but it's interesting to me that on social media, increasingly, like when you tweet something about a brand, like you say, this is the worst Delta airline meal I have ever had. If you're, like there's somebody whose job it is to use a search, like a Google search mechanism, to search through all the tweets in the world, to find people mentioning Delta Airlines, to look and see, are you a frequent flyer mile? Are you a frequent flyer member? Should I care about you? Do you have a large social network? And if you're unhappy, like, oh, we're so sorry, sir. Like, let's give you 12,000 frequent flyer miles, and try to make it up to you. So in a way, it's sort of a new way for brands to interact with customers, and that's already happening through text. So this is sort of the next thing. Yeah.
So a question: do you see there's a sort of a generational difference in terms of how generations perceive invasion of privacy?
Yes.
Because I have kids, I keep telling them the world actually existed before the internet. And God help them if they ever lose their power connection. But do you see the younger generation sort of saying, we don't care?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the younger generation is very blasé, but maybe it's swinging back. Like maybe the generation after them will be even more savvy about never. I mean, look at Snapchat. Like Snapchat is a private sharing network. It's exploding faster than Facebook, and that's what the kids are using these days. They don't want their friends to see everything that they're posting. They want to post something and have it disappear. So like that, to me, signals actually like a sophistication about understanding that you don't want data to last forever.
Do you think it's a part of the maturation process that there could be a shift that goes along?
I think so. Like, well, why else would Snapchat be so much more popular than Facebook as the way that people share? I mean, I think it's also interesting that, I mean, my kids are 6 and 11, so I don't. I tively control like what they do. Like I control the apps that they use, and I control the hours that they use them. Everybody makes different choices about this type of thing, but they're not doing a lot of like Instagram social sharing at this point. So I'm not an expert, and if you have older kids, you probably know more than I do.
Maybe just to answer a question, this has to do with there's a big chunk of the population, the baby boomers, who are getting on in years, and a lot of these technologies, I would think, are targeted towards letting this generation age in place.
Yes.
And I'm just kind of curious what
it's seen as a huge opportunity. Like all of the macro trends say, the things, if you're going to build an Internet of Things company and you look at the total available market size, like do an aging in place application, because there's going to be so many of us that are going to be at that stage. But that's contrary to your entrepreneurial spidey sense that says, don't try to sell things to people who aren't interested in them. You know, like if you want to sell things to early adopters, like don't pick 70-year-olds probably, because they aren't the early adopters. I mean, they are using Facebook voraciously these days, but really? I'm still using Facebook, really? Okay. That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, so sometimes there's a mismatch between the audience that you would hope is large, that would use something, and the adoption patterns. Yeah. So one of the last frameworks in the book, and I won't talk about all about the end of the book, but is to sort of offer this guideline. So if you're going to take an ordinary thing like a trash can and try to make it smart, we took this trash can. It's a Danish design trash can called VIP. Does anybody know this company? And that's the owner. We took this trash can, and it's like a foot pedal thing, and we embedded a camera and a little bit of internet connection. So the first thing we did was to connect it. The next thing we did was to have it sense what you threw out. So it would say like, oh, that's Campbell's soup, or that's a banana peel, or it's, you know, coconut water, or whatever. So it would know what, you know, sort of what you've thrown away. And then we hooked, to personalize it, we hooked it up to your Amazon account. So it would sort of propose into your Amazon Fresh, you know, like maybe you need more Campbell's soup, like you threw one out. And the next thing it could do is to sort of connect it to your social network. So it could say, you know, it could boast, you know, how many points on your dieting profile or whatever. And the next thing we would is this notion of called gamification, which is to use the conventions of video games, like of points and streaks and badges and other, you know, game mechanisms. And the last thing is to like sort of embed a story in it, because we did all of that and it was still boring. And so the story that we came up with for the trash can was a guy who lives in the trash can, which is from my youth. And the guy would give you a hard time about what you threw out, or propose sort of a better thing. So if you did, you know, coconut water shipped all the way from Asia, really? Like, can I get you something more local? Or a third box of cookies this week? Are you sure? Like, you sure you want more of those? Or out of season? Like, these are out of season strawberries. You really want more of those? And if you didn't like his subtle suggestions, his subtle nudges, you just kick the can. He would just do it right. So it's sort of a way of embedding something. The last thing I want to show you is something is a table. I think you get my theme now, that I'm interested in embedding a little bit of feedback in lots of ordinary things. So this is a table that tries to encourage conversational balance. We certainly need it in my house, but it was designed for a work environment. So if you have people, I read this book called Quiet. Did anybody else read this? What I took away from Quiet is that introverts, extroverts, and introverts have just as many good ideas as extroverts, but are usually suppressed in conversation or at work. So why not make a centerpiece to a table that would sort of become, that would show people's contributions as sort of plant growth and then become more beautiful over time. So the whole table is like, woohoo, we're like all making something together. So we did this for Salesforce with an architecture firm called Gensler, which is a big architecture firm. The table's a commercially available table now. It's called the Balance Table, and it's for meeting mindfulness. So it has these little microphones embedded on each facet and a constellation of LEDs, sort of like a star pattern. And as you speak, you can see like whether one person's dominating, and maybe that's appropriate for the person to be dominating the conversation, or maybe it's more, maybe the table should be more sort of self-facilitating. So after 10 or 15 minutes, you can look down at the table and you can see like, he hasn't said anything and she's totally been taking over the conversation. So, you know, maybe that's appropriate, or maybe they will both do, you know, have a little more sort of respect for airtime. So I hope I've convinced you that there are 4 ways it could go with the future of how we interact with technology, and enchanted objects are the most preferable future, and they'll make our interface to technology more tangible, more haptic, like those wallets, more incidental, like the Facebook coffee table, you know, something that just sort of is embedded, or something that's more expressive, interfaces that are more expressive, like the I/O brush, and ultimately more humanistic. And I sort of see these things not as trinkets, but as things that could really affect, big sort of societal issues of how we feel overwhelmed with information and could have that more summarized, or how we connect more seamlessly with others, or feel safe, or have longer, or affect healthcare, or move around the world, or learn and play and create. So thanks for your attention and interaction. Yeah.
Is it venture capital? Is it part of the general corporate sponsoring of the Media Lab?
Right.
You have so much creativity and
Thank you.
freedom, and I'm wondering, you just generate all your ideas and find money, or how are you able to do your work?
I have two very different lives and two different models. So one is I teach at the Media Lab, and some of the student examples, I think you can probably tell which ones are student examples. The Media Lab is an extraordinary place. It has hundreds of students and 14 or 15 research groups, and it's funded by memberships with companies, with innovative companies that want to spend $100,000 to $200,000 a year in most cases for access to the students and to the research and to the intellectual property that is created there. So there are companies like Steelcase that I've worked with over the years that they're trying to think about the future of the office and office furniture and how to get past cubicles, and so they're interested in embedding technology into all kinds of things, from lighting to classrooms and things. So that's one life, and the other life is to being an entrepreneur. And over the last 25 years, I've started 5 companies, and almost all of those are, except for the first one, are venture-backed. So the company, the pill cap company, raised about $5 million over the course of its 4-year lifetime. Primarily from, the first round was from angel investors, like Nicholas Negroponte, who was one of the founders of the Media Lab, put money in. Usually sort of in like 10 to 25K chunks. And usually raising a round of less than about $500,000 usually sort of get started. And those people own a lot of the company because they get in early. And then we raised more money later on and sold that company to a biotech billionaire named Patrick Soon-Shiong in Los Angeles, who owns the chunk of the Lakers. And this current company, the Ditto, has raised money from Boston VCs like Q-Ball, Stage 1 Ventures, and has to date has raised about $5.2 million. And they all hope that it will have a successful exit. They're not doing it. They're not giving us the money because they think it's a charitable contribution. Like the last people that put money into Vitality got 10x their money out, and they think they will do that again. I'm sort of. I am not a full professor at the Media Lab, and so I just teach there. So I don't get. I get UROPs. I get students that do work on projects for me, but I don't have full-time masters or PhD students like some other professors have. Yeah.
I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about the Tesla cane.
I think you should look it up because I know it's a cane that has an accelerometer in it that knows how it's being used, and it tries to anticipate falls. But I was intrigued that it was taking an ordinary object like a cane and trying to embed a little bit of sensing in that object. So I've read about it and I thought, oh, that's really interesting, and so I put it on the poster. That's one of the ones I know the least about of the ones on the poster. And this certainly doesn't cover it. There are hundreds more in each category that I would add at this point. But this is sort of a way of getting into it. Yeah.
All of this stuff feels to me like it's going to eventually end up to be pollution and add to the stuff that you're trying to clean up. Is all this stuff, am I right, or is all this going to biodegrade and
No, I'm sure there's an issue of waste, and I think I tried to address that point a little bit with the idea of over-the-air updates. I think if you do have functionality, extra functionality, in the form of like computation, like in this pen, for example. You know, the camera is not going to be old, and the processor is probably not going to be too slow, and the microphone is not going to be too old. Microphones like don't change that rapidly, but the software inside will probably have a new version that better understands, you know, Greek or Cyrillic or Arabic, or can do math for you, like if you write down numbers, or maybe it plays notes when you write down music notes, or like, and all of that functionality could be upgraded by upgrading the software. So I guess I am worried about the landfill problem, but I don't think the solution is that everyone should only have one computer. You know, I mean, cars already have like 60 or 70 or 90 or 100 computers like in every single car, and so I mean, how many motors do you have in your life? I mean, you use the Sears and Roebuck catalog at the turn of the 19th century had one motor and 24 attachments, because motors were expensive. So it had like the blender attachment and the fan attachment and the clothes washing attachment to the motor, and you had all these attachments and one motor, because motors were expensive. But now, like, how many motors do you have in your house? You have one in your drill, another one in your mixer, another one in you probably have another mixer, you probably have, I mean, we have motors everywhere, but then we don't think of them as motors anymore. We think of them as the objects that sort of encase them. So I think that's what's happening to computing as well. So I don't think I don't know what we would do if we were to fret the landfill problem of chips. Chips are getting smaller. They're getting more flexible. I think the bigger issue, I'm not a trash expert. Is anybody a trash expert? I would worry about things like desks, or I'd worry about cars, or like furniture, or like big stuff, not microchips. Plastic bags, yeah. Or like water bottles. How many water bottles did we use as a group today? Like, let's stop doing that. Yeah.
Just, so you work at the media center now.
The media lab, yeah.
Some of these things that are like on the immortality, is that part of is that things that the MIT Aging Lab is working on as well?
Joe Coughlin runs a group called the MIT Age Lab,
right.
And he is specifically working on sort of issues around aging. I don't know what he's currently working on.
I wondered, like the cane or the sleeper.
I know. I think the cane was done at maybe Carnegie Mellon or some other place. But yeah, about half of the things on here are commercial products, and about half are things that are still in the lab. Yeah. Yes.
I wanted to know what the additional functionality of the withering scale and the beam toothbrush.
Sure. So the withering scale is a weight scale. I think it also calculates like body mass index, which is sort of indicative of how much body fat you have, and it talks to the internet through a connection called a Wi-Fi connection, which is a connection that's many people have in their house. So it tracks your weights. You can, on your app, you can see trends over time. It probably rewards you for hitting goals, and it also hooks up to your social network. As I said before, you can probably have it like tweet your weight every week if your friends will give you a hard time about that, and maybe that's motivational for you.
What about the beam toothbrush?
The toothbrush, they just sent me one of these. I'm having my daughter use it because she has terrible teeth brushing habits. So it basically gives you an app. It has a little wireless connection to your phone, and has an app, and it shows you how frequently you brush your teeth, and it gives you rewards and incentives for brushing regularly.
How much does that
for
cost?
2 minutes? I don't know. They, I'm guess. I mean, I don't know. Probably more than the Braun. But that's a good point, which is,
he's not good at brushing.
As a consumer, you may be price sensitive to not buying the beam toothbrush, but as a product company, you're eager for any sort of differentiation. Like you're trying to figure out, what should we do next? Like if you're a luggage company like Samsonite or Toomey, you're like, we tried color, we tried wheels, we tried, we tried a partnership with Ducati for a fashion brand or something. What should we do next? And the product differentiation opportunity is vast, because if you're a maker of desks or luggage, now you can add a feature, a service to your product. Like maybe your luggage weighs itself, or maybe it tweets you when it's coming out on the carousel, or and then that suggests maybe a new business model. Like maybe people pay for a subscription to the luggage rather than just for the widget. Yeah.
I have to say, the weight and scale also tells you when it's going to rain.
It does?
I have no idea why.
Why?
Little umbrella drops and little drops.
Oh, that's funny.
It's bizarre.
Huh.
And that was actually an upgrade that they sent over the air that tells you this afternoon and tonight what the.
Wow. Huh.
Good.
Well, it's interesting because like once you have a screen there and you have internet connectivity, you're sort of tempted to, toss in New York Times headlines. Yeah. Yeah.
Some of these computerized objects, could there be anything, let's say, detrimental to your health? No, with all this.
The biggest, I don't think you should worry about radio frequency, about radio frequency information harming you, like the sleeping next to a cell phone or something. I'm not that worried about those beams close to your brain. I guess the thing that I'm mostly worried about is how much they soak up your attention, and that's why I'm sort of down on cell phones, because they've completely monopolized my how I spend my time, even when I'm with my kids at the park. And I'm hoping that the Apple Watch and other devices can sort of move the stuff that I need to know into the object or into the place in my life where I should pay attention to it, so I'm not always like checking this and checking that and checking this other thing.
The military, I think, for a number of years struggled with that problem, especially jet fighter pilots. Because there's just so much information.
Situational awareness.
That jet can provide you. And
right.
Are you gaining any learnings from the military as far as information presentation? Because I think the object of a jet fighter pilot is to fly a plane.
Yeah.
Right. I worry about a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, I haven't worked a lot with military applications, but some of my students have. One student told me last year that he was working on a helicopter and they couldn't figure out where to put the information that you're flying over a dangerous area. Like, where else? Like, all of the other, the heads-up display is saturated with information, your hands are saturated, the cockpit is saturated. So they decided to make your seat bumpy dynamically. So you'd sort of like feel a little massage on this side versus that side, which I thought was a pretty interesting. Because we have a lot of skin. There's a lot of skin that could be another interface, more information. My wife is a therapist, and she was saying, will the new Apple Watch, will it tickle me in a way that's subtle enough that no one else will know when its 15 minutes is up? I'm like, I don't know, maybe so. So yeah, I think there's opportunity for a lot more subtlety, right? A lot more subtlety in all these devices and how they interact with us. Well, it's 8 o'clock. Thanks for your attention. I'm happy to answer emails. Thanks.